Tuesday's SpaceX launch marked a new era for the private space race, but now the reveal at the end is raising some important questions about pollution outside the atmosphere. You see, the Falcon Heavy rocket launched Elon Musk's Tesla Roadster away from Earth and toward Mars. The SpaceX founder's car is worth $250,000. Musk said he hoped the car and the spacesuit-clad dummy in the driver's seat would travel between Earth and the red planet for 1 billion years. Unfortunately for him, or perhaps the dummy, that probably won't be the case. You see, even if the car avoids any major collisions, the sun's radiation will likely tear it to bits. But the launch itself is raising questions about junk left in space, not all of which will disintegrate over time. Derrick Pitts is Chief Astronomer and Planetarium Director at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, and he joins us now via webcam to talk about this. Derrick, thanks for connecting with us. Besides the $250,000 cars that are now up there, what is space junk and how much of it is floating over our heads?
There is a vast array of all kinds of pieces of satellite material, detritus left over from those launches of those satellites, all in orbit around the Earth. And it depends on the size you want to measure, how many pieces there are. The number can range anywhere from some 20,000 pieces up to maybe as many as 100,000 if you go by size. The smaller the object, the more of them there are. The big objects, there are at least 20,000 of those in orbit.
Talk more about those big objects, because we know that a Chinese space lab is expected to crash down to Earth sometime in March. What danger does that pose, if any? I'm guessing it does.
The big objects that are in orbit are the big satellites. Many of them, most of them, are in stable orbits. Things like the Chinese space station is no longer in a stable orbit, and it will come down. Hopefully, the parts and pieces that don't burn up on re-entry will end up dropping into an ocean someplace or into one of the uninhabited portions of the planet. But there's always a chance that pieces could come down some places that are habited. It has happened in the past, and there's nothing to say it can't happen in the future.
And by the time it hits someone in New York on the head, is it the size of a pebble? Is it something to be concerned about? Or is this really more about having a long-term plan for the junk in space which continues to accumulate?
The long-term plan is extraordinarily important because there's a lot of material up there, most of which has to come down at some point. And so either it burns up entirely on re-entry, which is typically the case, or we have to come up with a plan for how to clean this stuff up, because in the future it will turn into a much larger problem than it is now and can be much more dangerous than it is now. And that's really the issue about having things break up in orbit and become even more numerous as projectiles that can zoom through space, crash into other spacecraft, and cause real problems.
And this breakup, this disintegration of what's up there is something that can be predicted. Can you just explain for us the science behind what will happen to Elon Musk's Tesla up there? As everyone's sharing pictures of how cool it is, what will actually happen to it?
What's going to happen to it is if it gets into a stable orbit, that will be one thing that would be good. But over time, it's going to deteriorate because of the incredible bath of radiation that comes out of the sun. Happens to everything in the solar system unless it's protected in some way or another. So the really soft parts of that, the car and the robot and all those things, those will be deteriorated by the solar energy, the solar wind that comes blasting out into the solar system. The harder parts will last for a bit longer, but eventually those two will break down, although it will take some time for that to happen. Let's just hope it doesn't sort of decline, its orbit decline in such a way that it becomes a problem either for Earth or for the planet Mars.
And in fact, apparently China is developing ways to break up this stuff, perhaps with lasers, so much more cool stuff ahead. Not getting your nod of approval?
No, that's not a good idea. They shouldn't try to do that. So they need to be really careful about how to get rid of those materials, because they can cause a much bigger problem by breaking things up into smaller pieces.
All right, Derrick Pitts, great to get your insight on all of this. Thanks for joining us from Philly.
Thanks for having me.